Net Daily senior staff writer, Dr. Jerome Corsi, #1 best-selling author of The Abomination and Unfit for Command. But Van Jones is an avowed communist who serves as a special advisor for Green Jobs, Enterprise, and Innovation to the White House Council on Environmental Quality. And this guy is an avowed communist working in the White House who believes in the teachings of Marxism, Leninism, and Mao Zedong. I know this sounds something like the 1950s when Senator Joe McCarthy made charges that there are communists in the State Department. But this is 2009 stuff. Days before his White House appointment, Van Jones, Obama's environmental advisor, used a forum at a major youth convention to push for what could easily be described as a communist or socialist agenda. Groups he's belonged to have praised Marx, Lenin, Engels, and Mao Zedong. And this guy is now advising Barack Hussein Obama, and he also is an avowed black nationalist, kind of like Jeremiah Wright, Obama's spiritual advisor for 20 years. There's a radicalism at the heart of the Obama presidency, non-covered by almost everyone outside of talk radio and World Net Daily and the Drudge Report.
Here's the great thing about where we are now, as in the whole green movement, whether you're a solar, wind, green construction guy like myself, all the way over to organic food. We are at the end of what we can do individually, and we are at the beginning of what we have to begin to do as communities. This is a key inflection point now. Even our movements can't function individually anymore. Our movements have to begin to come together. Why do I say that? If we don't minimize the pain, as a society, minimize the pain for low-income people and maximize their gain as we transition, minimize their pain on food prices, minimize their pain on gas prices, minimize their pain on home heating prices, right? In other words, the government should step in to help those at the bottom be able to meet those needs. We have to say, yes, we are going to move into a world where we're not having cheap, dirty energy and cheap, dirty food. That's not going to be the world anymore. But as we make that transition, we're going to make sure that you don't starve and you don't freeze. This is post-Katrina. We're not going to let you sink and swim as we do the right thing for the planet. We're going to be there for you.
That's enough. That's Van Jones talking about the collective. Joining me now, continuing, is Dr. Jerome Corsi of WorldNetDaily.com. And Jerome, WorldNet Daily, Joseph Farr has done quite a bit of reporting now with many others on the issue of Van Jones. Who is Van Jones in the White House?
Well, he is. In fact, we got a top headline on WorldNet Daily right now on Van Jones. He is a White House appointment on their green environmental agenda, Green Jobs. I guess he's the Green Jobs Czar. And what we're documenting here is that just 2 weeks before Van Jones was appointed to his White House job, he delivered this keynote address at a Power Shift 09 meeting. It was billed as the largest youth summit on climate change in history. About 12,000 young people attended the event at the D.C. Convention Center 2 weeks before Van Jones came into the White House to take his new ECHO job. And in the speech, and we've got it archived, the speech is up on YouTube, and we've got a link to it. Jones was throwing around these terms like eco-apartheid and green for some. and he has this whole speech in which he's talking about our Native American brothers and sisters who were pushed, bullied, mistreated, and he wants to share the wealth, give them the wealth, give them the wealth, no justice on stolen land, we owe them a debt. I mean, this dates back to his creation of the revolutionary communist group called STORM, which we've also documented and got links to in the article. STORM stands for Standing Together to Organize a Revolutionary Movement.
And in that treatise, doesn't Jones talk glowingly about Marxism and Leninism?
Yes. Absolutely. The manifesto, and again, we link to it. You can read it on the Internet. Just go to WorldNet Daily, top article. It's called Reclaiming Revolution, which is the manifesto of STORM that is Van Jones's group. And in it, he's talking about all the principles, commitment to the fundamental principles of Marxist Leninism. Just quote, we agreed with Lenin's analysis of the state and party. This is in the manifesto. We found inspiration in the revolutionary strategies developed by third world revolutionaries like Mao Zedong. I mean, this is what Van Jones has proclaimed.
Can you imagine if during the Bush administration he hired a Nazi who praised Adolf Hitler?
Right.
What would happen?
David Duke of the White House.
The world would end. I mean, the media. So how come Van Jones has gotten all these passes for these many months?
Well, it's what I wrote in The Abomination, that people got to understand that Barack Obama is a far leftist, and he's not going to rule from a pragmatic center position like Bill Clinton did. This is, the Barack Obama administration. Obama's a Saul Alinsky acolyte, rules for radicals. And as such, they use these Machiavellian principles where Obama proclaims, as does Rules for Radicals, that People are impressed by appearances, not reality.
And he's not the only radical, correct? You have the Carol Browners. This is typical of the 31 czars in the Obama White House. The most radical elements of the American leftist movements are hired by Obama on environmental and jobs matters.
A long list, and we've been documenting it in WorldNet Daily that as we go through who these czars are and what their agendas are, this is where the redistribution of wealth agenda is being implemented by the Obama administration. And so Van Jones is just one in a group that are within the White House, not reporting to Congress, not appointed to Congress, but yet implementing policy positions in the White House and having a background like Jones does of straight-out communism. Just take a look at WorldNet Daily and the link to his pamphlet, Reclaiming Revolution, which was Storm's official manifesto.
Well, you'd have to claim, though, Dr. Corsi, relative to Carol Browner and many of these other ones, it's arguable whether they're communists, but in Van Jones's case, he says I'm a communist, he says I'm a revolutionary, he uses the code words out of the communist manifestos, he speaks glowingly of Marxism, Leninism, and Mao Zedong. There's no question about that.
None at all. He's proclaimed in the Storm to be a Marxist, a revolutionary, Marxist-Leninist. And Jones also ties into this board of the Apollo Alliance, which is the coalition of labor, business, environmental, and community organizers that are all tied into ACORN. These groups also stem back to the revolutionary Cloward-Piven theory, which is another revolutionary socialist idea that came out of Columbia University. One of the reasons I want to see Barack Obama's record at Columbia, I want to know how much time he spent with the two sociologists, Cloward and Piven, who taught revolutionary. These are the founding ideology from which ACORN came.
Right, and he was an ACORN attorney. There's no question that Obama, on behalf of ACORN, sued Chicago banks to make sure they made loans that would not be paid back. And now ACORN is suing the banks for foreclosing on loans. It's kind of a catch-22. You're sued for not making the loan, then you're sued for making the loan.
Well, and President Obama, when he was in Chicago as a community organizer, not only was a lawyer working with ACORN to sue Citibank for not making more loans to subprime lenders, people who really couldn't afford the homes. And he also worked on this Project Vote, President Obama did, and Project Vote was one of the early efforts of ACORN Project, to register voters. And of course, ACORN has now got criminal investigations in several states. They received over $800,000 from President Obama's 2008 presidential campaign, ACORN did, to register voters.
And when he was a U.S. Senator briefly, he worked hard to suppress efforts by George Bush to rein in Fannie and Freddie. Obama did.
Exactly. Again, this entire agenda on the subprime loans, this radical agenda, it is one that ends up creating the kind of bubble that caused the collapse of the economy going back a year ago, when we had all the subprime loans collapse in the mortgage packages that the banks owned. This is the basic problem. In higher interest rate environments, when Ben Bernanke was raising rates after the rates have been kept so low in 2003, 2004, and we're bubbling up again.
Now, well, Doctor, tell me why the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Tampa Tribune, the Houston, the San Antonio, the St. Louis, Missouri, the Washington newspapers are not covering the radicalization of the executive branch of government in unspeakable ways that never would have been accepted by any other Democrat. If Kennedy hired communists or Carter or Clinton, all hell would have broken loose. Why is Obama getting away with it?
Well, I think this is why WorldNet Daily is doing so well. We're thriving. I mean, take a look at our two top headlines, two stories that the New York Times and the others will not cover. One is the spread of the birth certificate billboards across America, and the second is the Spread the Wealth Czar, Van Jones, documenting his communist background. We've got the links, we've got the documents, we've got the arguments, and the New York Times won't cover the stories at all because they are about as in the bag, as pro-Obama, uncritical. And WorldNet Daily is committed that if we have an undocumented president in the White House now, President Obama will not be able to run for re-election undocumented, because we're going to continue to press for all these documents on get the facts in front of the people of the birth certificate, the radical education at Columbia and at Occidental. We want to see all of the State Department records to know if President Obama ever did get adopted, if he had a passport from Indonesia in which he used to go to
You can't get
Pakistan.
that, right?
Can't get that. Can't get the school records from Occidental. He was rooming with these Pakistani foreign exchange students. Did President Obama register at Occidental and Columbia as a foreign exchange student? Who are the people who recommended President Obama? We've had very many radical influences that have suggested they were the ones behind,
including Frank Marshall, right?
Frank Marshall Davis, his mentor, written about in Dreams from My Father, another journalist, African-American journalist and poet from Chicago, a member of the Communist Party who retired in Hawaii, and Barack Obama Jr. President Obama in his autobiography, Dreams from My Father, talks about how Frank Marshall Davis was his mentor going to high school.
And this is, again, an avowed communist.
Avowed communist.
And this was the, so the spiritual leader is Jeremiah Wright, and the advisor growing up in high school is Frank Marshall Davis.